Hello and welcome back to another episode of Spanj's Build Academy, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about advanced texturing techniques, and specifically a technique called texturing with blocks. Now, I picked up that phrase from a little known creator in the Empyrion world called Piston. I was fortunate to have a chance to talk to Piston before he left the Empyrion space, and he managed to download some knowledge into me about how he makes his builds so fantastically awesome looking. So it was a big long chat actually on Steam, and one of the things that stuck with me the most was when he was telling me about how, you know, texturing with blocks is basically what he said. And it was a case that put down the texture gun. Okay, you don't need this, not right away. Okay, the first thing that you need to be doing is texturing with blocks. And what does that mean? Basically, I had to think about it for a while, but essentially texturing with blocks is things like this. It's like this, these thruster guards here, they're completely pointless. They might add a little bit of armor to the thrusters, but they're otherwise purely decorative. Now, I could have just not had those and done some texturing gun stuff around there, and that would have been it. And that would have been okay, but it wouldn't be great. So texturing with blocks is a technique that just takes a long time to master. You know, I've tried to do a bit of it up on the bridge here on the sides. I'm not really sure. This is supposed to be some kind of sensor antenna things, but you know, I'll give it a texture with a texture gun to see if I can make it look okay. But yeah, it takes practice. You're gonna create things that don't look right. You're gonna create things that are wrong, and just get rid of them, start again. But I wanted to give you guys some examples of good texturing with blocks. So I spawned in a bunch of stuff from the workshop. Okay, there's a few ships here from McFluffface, one for myself, and a couple of others. So texturing with blocks, McFluffface is very good at it. He has one of these people with a natural eye and that imagination where he can just see the blocks and he can create these wonderful shapes and give his ships some amazing flair and style. And we can see it here on the Cobra. This is quite an old blueprint now, it's been around for a while, but one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you if you want to improve your own builds is to just look at other people's stuff. Okay, look at the builds on the workshop, download the ones that look really cool, that look like something how you would want your builds to look, and just look at them. Just spawn them into creative mode, fly around them, look at them, deconstruct them, and just look at how they've managed to get things looking so cool, so funky. And it is all just creative and imaginative use of the available blocks in the game. Bit of piping here, and some of the half blocks and things like that, and they've just sort of padded it out, and it's completely unnecessary and pointless, but it's beautiful, it's decorative. And then you use the texture tool, and then you use the texture tool to just give it that final polish and that final look. I mean, there's not much in the way of texture tool stuff going on here. The majority of the texture on this ship is with blocks. It's not with the texture tool. When you look at it, you think about it, yes, there is texture tool detail in here. You can see on the pipes here, you can see on the vents here. But the vast majority of texture there is with blocks, not with the texture tool. That's what I mean. That's what Piston means when he says texture with blocks. And we can see, if we have a look at one of my early builds here, the CX-23 Strike Fighter was probably roughly when I was starting to experiment with texturing with blocks. Okay, and you can see it sort of most prominently on the front here, where I just create these sort of antenna things poking out the front. Inadvertently, these actually act as quite good armor guards for the weapons on the front of here, so they do absorb several shots rather than the guns taking them, so that's pretty good. But you can definitely see, if you look at things like the Cobra and this, what's the name of that one? Is it Signin? Yeah, the Signin Mark 1. You look at the Signin there and the Cobra, and then you look at CX-23, you can definitely start to see some of the influences, especially with things like the little line textures that McFluffface uses in a lot of his builds. I've not so much, but you know, started putting some of them in there. There's some piping works and stuff like that. This is actually a revised set. These vents were put in because of the wall server, so never had them originally, but they had to be put in because thrusters had to be exposed or something. Other things like this was originally just a flat surface of armor, and then I just changed the block out here for the quarter circle ones, and it just gives it a bit of lift. You know, gives it a bit of 3D texture. The thruster ports here are mostly textured gun work, but you use the sort of rounded blocks to give it that look. Now that's pretty much with the CX-23. That's pretty much where it ends. As soon as you go inside, it is just texture gun work there. But there's so little space to work with here, as you can see, that there isn't much opportunity. And we can see that also in a lot of McFluff face builds as well. They look fantastic on the outside. On the inside, they're okay, in my opinion. And I'm sorry, Mr. McFluffface, if you're watching this, but they're okay. You've done it. You've got some piping, you've got some stuff in here, you've got some good use of shapes and blocks and stuff like that. But the real magic for these builds is very much on the outside, and you can see here with the signaling as well. You know, how many of you would just, if you had some rocket pods on the outside, you just put a box with some rockets on the outside and maybe a couple of angled blocks? And this is what McFluffface does with them. He puts them in a very slim box, and yes, okay, if it's speaking from a survivability point of view, this isn't going to hold up to much, but it does look beautiful, and you've got to admit that. So this is primarily what I mean by texturing with blocks. Now, it does extend to the inside as well. I've also spawned this one on the workshop, although I can't remember its name. It's the Explorer something or other. Demether Explorer class, also on the workshop here. And the inside of this is particularly impressive. So, just looking down this corridor, you can notice straight away, it's not square. It's not square. The walls are sloped, the ceilings are sloped. There's depth, there's texture. Just with that, and then obviously you finish it off with a texture gun. The little details like having the central part of the corridor one texture and then the outer sides another just gives it more depth. So there's use of the texture tool there as well. But it's used blocks to convey functional areas of the ship that otherwise within game are just more blocks, like the bunks there. The bathroom here is particularly good. You've got, you know, he's used textures here with the blocks in order to create a sink-like structure, a shower-like structure. You know, he's used the pipes block texture. I could go on, basically, but I think you're starting to get the idea of texturing with blocks. And you combine the blocks with the texture gun, and you come up with creations like this, where, you know, these blocks, they look like cushions. Clever use of textures. But putting glass and things like that, clever use of blocks. We go into the cockpit of this ship, and it's things like, I think it's run out of power. Yeah, it's things like this. You've got a survival constructor there, a bunch of cargo boxes and 3 LCD screens, and a half-slope block, and it looks fantastic. It looks like a proper computer terminal. Use of blocks and textures, and then you get results like that. Now you can see in this ship, you know, there's examples of both very clever use of blocks and cases where the creator didn't have the room to really do much with it. Like this wall here is just texture gun work, but that's because, well, there's just not that much room to play with, as you can see. So there are limitations that you can do. You could have brought this block out, but then it would have blocked the path and you might get stuck. So you can see why he did that. It extends to CVs as well, and bases and everything, basically. The whole texturing with blocks things. I've loaded in the Load Gigant. This is a very old blueprint on the workshop. But it's a very, very good example of texturing with blocks, because almost every inch of this damn thing uses that technique to just give it that fantastic look, in my opinion. You can see it here, these blocks, this kind of almost frame-like texture that he's got running down here. It's just blocks. He barely used the texture gun at all, in fact. That's the original texture of hardened steel. So piping, pipe works, use some of the dome blocks there. And then this is the other thing, this is way more advanced stuff, is you have sort of, I don't know what to call it, but where you've got the outer wall extends beyond, and then you have this depth inside. And it just looks great. It looks really good. And you can build things like that. I did a bit of this with the Naginata. A little bit of that with the Naginata. If I just sort of zip over here, I've got the Naginata parked here. You can see I'm trying to take influence from there here. I've got, this is nothing, these are just blocks. They don't do anything. But there's depth there. There's depth, 3D element. Combined that with the blocks and the texture tool, and you can create some very cool looking things. So anyway. How do we apply that in real terms without basically just copying other people? Because this is what we want to avoid. We want to be able to do it ourselves. We want to be able to adapt and create our own style and things like that. It's fine to take influences from other people's creations. That's how you learn, and that's how you get better. See how other people did it, and then you adapt it, you adjust it. Well, just experiment, basically. Like what I've done here with this weird antenna thing that just looks awful. You know, it's experimenting with the different block shape to see if we can create shapes and interesting objects that just break up and give people a second look at the ship or the base or whatever it is we're building. So what we got here on the roof of this thing here is a very flat surface. It's a blank canvas, okay? It's functional, as in it's the roof of the bridge, or will be the bridge of this ship, but there's nothing else to it. But what we can do is we can use the blocks and shapes and things like that, and deco blocks and stuff to give it a bit more life, a bit more interest. So let's spawn in a couple of, we got some radar discs here. We got, I do apologize if you guys can hear the shouty people outside. I wish they would piss off. Right, so the first thing to do is try and sort of imagine in your head how you want it to look. Now I'm imagining some kind of like almost like a crow's nest up here, but not pirate style crow's nest, just a sort of something for people to sort of stand around in. But because this is a spaceship, it's completely pointless. So I'm probably just going to fill it with antennae and stuff like that. But I want to give it a little bit of structure. So I'm going to build out this area. A bit like that. Okay, and then what we can do is put these sort of half blocks, break them up a bit, and then on the sides here, this thing's too big. Okay, straight away I can tell this thing's too big. It's going to dwarf the entire situation there. So I'm going to switch over to antennas and see if we can figure out some nice antennas to use. So I don't want ones that are too big. This one's perfect, I think, because it's sort of small, not too intrusive, things like that. So I put one of those there, and I maybe put one of these. Although this thing is slightly too big, in my opinion, maybe. We'll see. We'll try it and we'll see. It looks a bit chunky, but let's go with it. Okay, so what we can do as well is we can use these ones to bring that round a bit. Use that one there to bring that round a bit in the same place. Yes. I haven't put symmetry mode on at the moment because I do want this to be slightly asymmetrical in places. So I'm going to use some half blocks here, and I'm going to create a sort of structure like that. I mean, it doesn't do anything, it's not anything important. But we're going to use these pipe blocks now. I'm going to put that here, I think. I'm going to put two right next to each other. And I'm going to put a curve so it almost looks like an exhaust pipe. Looks good. Looks good. And we can use these to create secondary antennas right next to our primary ones there. Give it almost like a sensor array kind of thing, going vibe. Okay, and then I'm going to use this, but I'm going to stick it on its end. That. Now I don't want this to be too busy. It's very easy to get carried away with this and just put too much there. But I'm going to see what we can achieve, and then I can adjust it as need be. So I want to put two of those like that, and then I'm going to create a bridge between them, kind of thing. I would like to be able to put one in the middle of those two, but I just don't have the block to do that. because these pipe blocks would overhang. Unfortunately, they're too wide. And that, I don't think would work. But what we can do with that is stick that there. Make that look like piping there. So that's what I mean. I mean, there you go. That's texturing with blocks. Now, if we combine that with the texture gun, we can come up with some great looking stuff. So let's do apply to whole block. Let's put some vents there. Let's take that off. Now I'm going to put some floor-like texture. Maybe this one. I don't think that. I think that would look party. Yeah, it's like a garden. But the idea is you just sort of play around with different ideas, different textures and things like that, and you find ones that look good eventually, and you'll learn which textures to use for certain things. Like I'm going to use this one here because it's a good pipe texture, but then I'm going to combine it with this one on the ends there to make them look like vents. Symbols. I'm going to use a whole block on that one to give these that kind of paneling look, I guess. Take the whole block off, do one side on that, and then use that for the rest of it. And eventually you'll end up with something that looks a bit like that. And you can adjust it, you can adapt it and change it. But that, in a sense, is basically texturing with blocks. And that's what I mean. It's not just having that flat surface and using the texture gun on its own. It's using the blocks to create different and interesting shapes, to break up those flat surfaces and give them more interesting appearance. And the best way to learn how to do that well, and this isn't a particularly good example because I rushed it for this video, the best way to learn how to do that is to look at other people's creations, see what other people done, see how they did it, and then take inspiration and adapt and create your own style from it. That is texturing with blocks. That is one of the most advanced texturing techniques you can try and master. You will not get it straight away. It will take time, it will take practice. It is frustrating, you will get it wrong, but you will get better and better and better. And soon enough, you'll be creating some awesome things. So enjoy it. That's texturing with blocks. That's today's video. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, consider smashing that like button for me. And make sure you hit subscribe as well for more videos from Spanj's Build Academy. Thank you very much for watching. And hopefully I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.